The doors of the Secret Service headquarters swung open with a force that made everyone inside turn their heads. The air inside the high-security facility was always thick with tension, but today something felt different. Agents whispered to each other in confusion as the unmistakable figure of Donald Trump strode in, his signature red tie slightly loosened, his expression unreadable. "Sir, with all due respect, we weren't expecting you," one of the agents stammered, stepping forward. Trump didn't stop walking. "That's the point," he said flatly. His eyes scanned the room like he was looking for something. No, someone. Behind him, his personal assistant and a few trusted security personnel trailed closely, their faces betraying a hint of nervousness. This visit was unannounced, off the books, and urgent. The director of the Secret Service, a seasoned veteran named Michael Harris, emerged from his office, adjusting his suit with a tight-lipped expression. "Mr. President," he greeted cautiously, addressing Trump with the title out of habit. "To what do we owe this unexpected—" Trump raised a hand to cut him off. "Cut the formalities, Harris. I need answers, right now." The room went still. Every agent within earshot exchanged glances. Answers to what? Harris hesitated. "Sir, perhaps we should discuss this in my office." But Trump shook his head. "Number right here, in front of everyone. I want to know—" He paused, his next words hanging heavy in the air. "Who the hell has been spying on me?" The tension shattered like glass. The entire headquarters fell silent. Spying on Donald Trump? Inside the Secret Service itself? Harris's face paled. This was bigger than he had thought. A heavy silence filled the room. The agents exchanged uneasy glances. Spying on Trump? Inside the Secret Service? Harris cleared his throat. "Mr. President, that's a serious accusation." Trump took a step forward, his voice firm. "I don't make accusations, I state facts." His sharp gaze scanned the faces around him. "I've seen the reports, Harris. Unauthorized surveillance, leaked information, and every damn time it traces back to somewhere inside this building." Harris's jaw tightened. He glanced at his deputy, Agent Rebecca Sloan, a woman with piercing green eyes and a reputation for uncovering buried secrets. She gave him a subtle nod. She knew something was off too. Trump continued, his voice growing colder. "I want every restricted file on my security detail from the last 6 months, every camera log, every agent roster, and I want it now." Harris hesitated. "Sir, those files are highly classified." Trump cut him off. "Don't talk to me about classified, Harris. You work for me, remember?" A tense beat passed. Harris exhaled sharply, then motioned to Sloan. "Get the files." Sloan turned, marching toward a secured archive room. Several agents followed, but Trump wasn't done yet. He pointed at Harris. "If I find out someone in your department has been feeding information to the wrong people, heads will roll." Harris swallowed hard. He had been in government long enough to know that when Trump set his sights on something, he never let go. Minutes later, Sloan returned, holding a thick folder. "These are the security reports, sir," she said, setting them down on the table. Trump flipped the folder open, and the moment his eyes landed on the first page, his face darkened. The room held its breath. Trump's voice was dangerously low. "What the hell is this?" Sloan leaned in to look, then gasped. The documents weren't just security logs. They were dossiers, detailed surveillance reports on Trump himself, and they were signed by someone inside the Secret Service. A charged silence filled the room as Trump's fingers tightened around the edges of the dossier. The papers inside weren't just reports. They were logs of his private meetings, phone calls, even conversations held behind closed doors. The level of detail was unnerving. His eyes darted to the bottom of the page, where a signature confirmed his worst fear. Agent Matthew Carson. Trump's gaze shot up. Carson? His voice was a mix of disbelief and barely restrained anger. One of my own agents was spying on me? Harris paled, his hands balling into fists. Sir, Carson is one of our senior agents. He's been with the Secret Service for over a decade. If this is real, we have a serious breach. Trump slammed the folder shut. It's real, and I want to know who he was working for. Sloan, ever the professional, had already pulled out her phone and was accessing internal databases. Her face was unreadable as she scanned the information. Then, suddenly, her breath hitched. Sir, Carson submitted a leave of absence request yesterday. Trump's stomach twisted. Where is he now? Sloane's fingers flew across the keyboard. She shook her head. That's the problem, sir. He's gone. No record of his whereabouts. His government-issued phone was last traced to an airport outside of D.C., but it's been disabled since. Harris cursed under his breath. This means he knew we'd find this. Trump straightened, his expression unreadable. Or he wanted me to find it. The weight of those words settled over the room like a thundercloud. Was Carson acting alone, or was he just a pawn in something much bigger? Then, before anyone could speak, a new voice cut through the tension. He wasn't working alone. All eyes turned to the doorway. Standing there, pale but composed, was Agent Daniel Ross, one of the longest-serving agents in the presidential detail. His face was grim. Mr. President, Ross said, stepping forward. I know what Carson was involved in, and I know who he was reporting to. Trump's expression hardened. Talk. Ross exhaled. It's bigger than just the Secret Service. Carson was feeding intel to someone powerful, someone inside the government. Trump folded his arms. Who? Ross swallowed. The Vice President. The room erupted. The room exploded with stunned voices. Harris took a sharp step forward, his face paling. You're saying the Vice President was behind this? Ross nodded solemnly. Carson wasn't just leaking information. He was following orders. Orders that came directly from Vice President Richard Callaway. Trump's expression was unreadable, but a fire burned in his eyes. He took a slow, measured breath before speaking. Why would my own Vice President be spying on me? Ross hesitated before answering. Because, sir, he doesn't trust you. He thinks you're a liability. He believes that the decisions you're making, both publicly and behind closed doors, are putting the country at risk. So, he took matters into his own hands. Trump's jaw clenched. And how long has this been going on? Ross glanced down. Since your first year in office. Sloane's fingers flew across her keyboard as she pulled up classified logs. Sir, this goes deeper than we thought. Callaway wasn't just having you monitored. He's been building a case against you. Meetings with intelligence officials, financial audits, attempts to block classified briefings from reaching your desk. Harris gritted his teeth. He's positioning himself to take you down. The realization set in like a slow-burning fire. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a coup in motion. Trump's voice dropped dangerously low. So what's his next move? Ross exhaled. Carson was only a small piece of this. Callaway's been working with key figures in the intelligence community. If I had to guess, he's planning something big. Something that could remove you from power, legally or otherwise. The room went still. Then Trump smirked. A cold, knowing smirk. They think they can outplay me. They forget who I am. He turned to Sloan and Harris. We're going to flip this on its head. If Callaway wants war, I'll give him one. But we do this right. No mistakes. Harris straightened. What's the play, sir? Trump's smirk faded, replaced with pure determination. We set a trap. The atmosphere in the headquarters was thick with tension. Trump's mind raced, weaving through the possibilities as the wheels of strategy began to turn. They couldn't take a direct approach against the vice president, not yet. They needed evidence, leverage, and the element of surprise. Trump paced back and forth, his hands clasped behind his back. We need to create a scenario where Calloway thinks he's in control, but in reality, we'll be the ones pulling the strings. He's used to hiding in the shadows. It's time to expose him. Sloane, her mind working at full speed, turned to him. I can hack into Calloway's private network, his encrypted communications. There might be something we can use against him. Trump nodded. Do it, but be careful. If Calloway even suspects we're onto him. He trailed off, leaving the threat hanging in the air. Harris, ever the loyal strategist, added, What about his associates? We know he's been working with key members of the intelligence community. If we bring them down, Calloway will have no choice but to show his hand. Trump turned to face him. We don't go after them directly yet. We want to trap Calloway in his own game. A long pause followed. The room hummed with the weight of the situation. Then Trump's gaze hardened, a spark of brilliance lighting his eyes. I want to plant misinformation. We'll leak a false intelligence report, something so outrageous it would make even Calloway question it. He looked directly at Sloane. You'll make sure it ends up in the right hands, and it needs to look like we're the ones trying to set him up. Sloane's fingers were already flying across the keyboard, setting up the channels of communication for the leak. I'll get it out through unofficial back channels. It'll look like something we'd do, but it won't be. We'll send a message that we're weak and divided. Trump grinned. And Calloway will bite. He'll think he's won, and then we turn the tables. We let him expose himself. Sloane paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. What if he doesn't take the bait? Trump's smile widened. He will. Everyone is driven by greed and power. Calloway's ego is his Achilles heel. He can't resist the chance to take me down. Harris spoke up, his voice steady. And when he makes his move, we'll be ready to strike. We'll have the evidence, and his career will crumble. He won't even see it coming. Trump clapped his hands together, his voice full of conviction. Exactly. We make it look like we're crumbling, but in reality, we're strengthening our position. The plan was set. The trap was ready to spring. Now, they just had to wait for Calloway to take the bait. It didn't take long. 3 days after the false intelligence leak, the first sign of Calloway's reaction arrived. Sloane, monitoring the situation closely, noticed the sudden shift in Calloway's behavior. His communications had gone silent, too silent. Then, a message came through. It wasn't from Calloway himself, but from one of his trusted allies in the intelligence community. The tone was unmistakable. We need to meet. The report is real. I'm sending you the details. We need to act fast. Sloane's fingers flew across the keyboard, tracing the origins of the message. It wasn't just any leak. It was an internal conversation within Calloway's inner circle, discussing the false intelligence report. Trump leaned over her shoulder as she read the message aloud. He's in. Now we just need to watch him play into our hands. The trap was closing. Harris stood up, his face grim. Do we have enough evidence to bring him down? Trump's eyes gleamed with confidence. We have more than enough. Once he makes his move, it's over for him. He'll be exposed for the traitor he is, and this country will never trust him again. The final phase of the plan was set in motion. The pieces were all in place, and now they just had to wait for Calloway to take the next step. Sloane leaned back, crossing her arms. If he takes the bait, we'll have him exactly where we want him. Trump's smile was sharp, his voice full of resolve. When he takes the bait, we'll end him. Calloway was a man who thrived in the shadows, a master manipulator who always thought 2 steps ahead. But he had underestimated one thing: the sheer audacity of Trump and his team. The bait had been taken. The message from Calloway's inner circle was confirmation enough. He was planning something. But what exactly? Was he preparing for an official move? Or was it something more clandestine, something that would lead directly to his downfall? The tension in the room was palpable. Trump stood at the center of his team, his back straight, his eyes narrowed. It's time. He thinks he's outsmarted us, but he's walked right into our trap. Sloane quickly scanned through the communication network she had planted, her mind working rapidly to trace the next move. I've got it. Calloway's planning an emergency meeting with the National Security Agency. He's trying to salvage his position. He thinks we're weak. He's going to expose our vulnerability. Trump's voice was cold as steel. He's playing into our hands. We'll let him think he's in control, but when he strikes, we strike harder. Harris's expression hardened as he turned to Trump. What's our play? We let him make the first move, Trump said with a smirk. And when he does, we'll shut him down faster than he can blink. The following day, Calloway held the emergency meeting. His mind was racing, trying to fix the mess that had spiraled out of control. He had to make sure the false report was buried, that no one would ever know it was a setup. The room was full of high-ranking intelligence officers, all on edge. Calloway, the vice president, stood at the front, his voice commanding attention. I trust everyone here knows the importance of what we're about to discuss, he began, his eyes scanning the room. We are facing a direct threat, and I need everyone on board. The false intelligence leak, it must be dealt with swiftly. The officers nodded, but something was off. There was a shift in the atmosphere, an undercurrent of suspicion. Calloway continued. We'll be contacting key figures within the administration to ensure they don't question the validity of our actions. This is our chance to move quickly and take back control. But as he spoke, he had no idea that he was already being watched. Trump and his team had planted a hidden observer in the meeting, a trusted ally who had infiltrated Calloway's circle long ago. They were listening in on every word, waiting for the moment Calloway would slip up. And then it happened. Just as Calloway was wrapping up, one of his senior officers, a man named Colonel Mason, stood up and confronted him. Sir, we need to talk, Mason said, his voice stern. There's something not right here. Calloway froze. He'd been expecting loyalty from everyone in the room, but now his plan was unraveling. Mason continued, his eyes narrowing. You want to move fast, but you're missing something. There's a leak. You're not the only one who knows about this fake intelligence report. Trump has been playing a game with you, and it's time you see it. The room went silent. Mason's words hit like a bombshell. Calloway's mind raced, but there was no time to formulate a response. He realized too late that he had underestimated Trump's reach. The trap was closing. Trump and his team were already preparing for the fallout. They had set the stage, and now Calloway had no choice but to expose his true intentions. As the meeting disbanded, Calloway quickly rushed back to his office, his heart pounding in his chest. Had Mason betrayed him? Could the entire operation be compromised? He checked his phone. There was an urgent message from his ally within the intelligence community. They know. Trump knows. Get out. It's over. Calloway's blood ran cold. The words hit him like a freight train. His entire empire was collapsing. Back at headquarters, Trump stared at the news feed on his phone. The tide was turning. Calloway was spiraling. It wouldn't be long before he would have no choice but to step down. Harris walked up to him, his voice calm but full of anticipation. It's over. We've won. Trump shook his head. Not yet. We make the final move. Calloway is a man of pride, and if he's cornered, he'll do something desperate. We need to finish this, now. Sloane, who had been quietly monitoring the situation, looked up. He's about to make a public statement. He's going to try and deflect, to claim he was framed. But we have everything we need. Trump nodded. Prepare the broadcast. We're going public. Callaway won't get away with this. The world watched as Trump took to the stage in front of the cameras. His expression was one of calm authority. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady, I'm here today to address the truth that some have tried to bury, and the truth that we will not ignore any longer. He gestured to a large screen behind him, and the room fell silent. On the screen were damning images and documents, proof of Callaway's actions, his deals, and his betrayal. This is the man who was plotting against our country, Trump said. This is the man who would have sold us out for power. And now we expose him for who he really is. As the images flashed across the screen, Callaway's face twisted in rage. His entire world crumbled before him. Just as Trump finished his speech and the crowd began to murmur, something unexpected happened. The screens behind Trump flickered for a moment, and suddenly a new image appeared. A darkened figure, obscured in shadows, his voice muffled but unmistakable. You've only seen the beginning, Trump. The audience gasped. The figure's face was hidden, but the tone of his voice was chilling, almost familiar. It was Callaway's voice, but there was something different about it, something more sinister. Sloane's fingers hovered over the controls, trying to figure out how the broadcast had been hijacked. It's an encrypted signal, she muttered. This wasn't a hack. This was intentional. Trump's face hardened as the voice continued. This isn't over. You think you've won? Wait until the truth comes out. The real mastermind. He's not who you think he is. The crowd was silent, their breaths held in anticipation. It's all connected. Then the broadcast cut off. A deep, unnerving silence filled the room. Trump clenched his fists, his mind racing. Who the hell was that? Who is he talking about? Sloane's voice was urgent. We have to find out who's behind this before it's too late. This could be a setup, a trap. Someone has been pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Trump's expression turned from confusion to realization. Someone's been playing us, but we'll play them back. Now, Trump and his team had to scramble to uncover the truth. They knew Callaway wasn't the only threat. Someone else was involved, a hidden figure who had been operating in the shadows, manipulating both Callaway and Trump's administration. Sloane worked tirelessly, breaking into encrypted files, tracking down leads, and following digital footprints. Harris organized secret meetings with his most trusted informants. And Trump? He wasn't just playing defense anymore. He was going on the offensive. But the clock was ticking. With the media frenzy surrounding the mysterious broadcast, it was only a matter of time before the public demanded answers. Would they uncover the truth before the unknown mastermind made their next move? Weeks passed. Tensions reached a boiling point, and the pressure was mounting. Trump's team had uncovered key information that led them to an underground network, one that had been pulling strings in both political and corporate spheres for decades. And then the unthinkable happened. Trump's team received an anonymous tip, an encrypted message containing the truth. The mastermind wasn't just anyone. It was someone close. Someone Trump had trusted for years. It was someone from within his own inner circle. Sloane was the first to realize it. It's him. It's Harris. The revelation stunned Trump. Harris, his most loyal ally, the man who had stood by his side through thick and thin. He couldn't believe it, but the evidence was irrefutable. Harris had been working for the other side all along, feeding information to Callaway and helping orchestrate the entire scheme. In a private meeting, Trump confronted Harris, his voice low but filled with fury. You've been behind this all along, haven't you? Why, Harris? Why betray me?" Harris's eyes were cold, devoid of remorse. "You never saw it coming, did you? All your life, you've been the one who pulls the strings, the one in control. But even a man like you can be outplayed." Trump took a deep breath, his mind calculating. This wasn't just about saving his administration anymore. It was about survival. "I've trusted you for too long, but you've made one fatal mistake, Harris," Trump said. "You thought you were the mastermind. But now it's my turn." Just as Harris attempted to flee, a surprising turn of events occurred. A group of security personnel burst into the room, not to arrest Trump, but to arrest Harris. The mastermind behind Harris's actions wasn't Trump's own team, but an even more powerful figure. Someone from the world of corporate elites, someone who had seen Trump as an obstacle for too long. But who could it be? Was it an enemy from Trump's past? Or had someone within his own administration orchestrated this entire scandal? The next few moments felt like a whirlwind, with Harris struggling in handcuffs, shouting that he was set up, blaming someone else for the conspiracy. As he was taken away, Trump couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whoever was pulling the strings had only just revealed their presence. With Harris behind bars, Trump's team set their sights on the bigger picture. The shocking truth was slowly being unraveled, piece by piece, but the true identity of the mastermind remained hidden. As Trump stood in front of the press, the questions poured in. "What does this mean for your presidency?" a reporter asked. Trump's expression hardened. "It means that I've learned who I can trust. It means that I'll fight harder than ever to protect this country from those who want to tear it apart." As Donald Trump walked deeper into the Secret Service headquarters, he felt an unfamiliar sense of unease. He had visited the agency countless times during his presidency, but today was different. This wasn't a routine visit. There was something in the air that made his instincts, sharp as ever, prick with tension. He passed rows of security agents, all with serious faces, a few of them acknowledging him with a nod, but there was an odd stillness in the atmosphere. Trump felt it. Something was off. His thoughts were interrupted when he was ushered into a private meeting room, one that he had never seen before. The room was dimly lit, with only a few harsh lights shining down on a table at the center. As he entered, a man he did not recognize was seated there. This wasn't a high-ranking official, nor was it someone from his past dealings with the Secret Service. The man stood up abruptly. "Mr. Trump," the stranger said, his voice cold but measured, "you need to hear this." Before Trump could respond, a loud click echoed, and the door slammed shut behind him. The stranger reached for a folder on the table, sliding it across to him. Trump took it cautiously, the weight of the situation beginning to sink in. As he flipped through the pages, his brows furrowed. The documents were confidential, but they weren't about routine matters. They were about him, his private dealings, his family, and, most shockingly, details of a covert operation that no one in his inner circle had been briefed on. "What is this?" Trump asked, his voice growing more tense with every passing second. The stranger leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "This is the truth you've been kept from. Your whole life has been a lie, Mr. Trump, and it's time you learned the real story." A chill ran down Trump's spine. As he continued to read, his hand trembled. The files contained shocking revelations about betrayals he hadn't known existed, about people close to him who had been working against him. It wasn't just political, it was personal. Trump's face grew pale as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. What had once seemed like a series of isolated incidents was now clear. This was all part of a much bigger plan, a plan to manipulate his entire career, his legacy, and his family's future. "Who are you?" Trump demanded, his voice finally breaking the silence. The man smiled, but it was a chilling smile. "I'm the one who's been watching over you, And I'm the one who's going to make sure you never find out the full extent of this." Trump stood up, fury rising in him. He had never been one to back down from a confrontation, especially not one so deeply personal. But the man's next words stopped him dead in his tracks. "I am your son." The room seemed to freeze. Trump's heart skipped a beat, and the world around him spun for a moment. He stumbled back into the chair, disbelief etched across his face. "What did you say?" Trump asked, his voice barely a whisper, barely a gasp. The man didn't speak again. Instead, he handed Trump a photograph. It was old, black and white, and the faces of two people looked back at him. One was unmistakably his, the other a woman with strikingly familiar features. "That woman was your wife before you ever met Melania. She had a son, and I was that son." The bombshell hit harder than any scandal, any political warfare Trump had ever encountered. The man who had just claimed to be his son, who had orchestrated this entire revelation, was a ghost from his past, a piece of his history he had long buried. Trump sat back in his chair, unable to process the reality of what he was being told. His mind raced, and as the weight of the moment set in, he realized the full scope of the game being played. His entire legacy was in the balance. And just as quickly as it had begun, the man turned, heading for the door. "You have a choice, Mr. Trump. You can continue living in the lie, or you can face the truth." With that, the door slammed open, and the stranger was gone, leaving Donald Trump alone in the room with the startling revelation.